The digital clock on Vikram's bedside table read 2:17 a.m. He was awake. Not suddenly, but with a creeping sense of unease. A sound had disturbed him. A faint, muffled cry. Or perhaps he had dreamt it. He lay still, listening. The hum of the central air conditioning was the only response. He closed his eyes, willing sleep to return. Then, a different sound. A soft, rhythmic thump from downstairs. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of something dragging. Vikram sat bolt upright. This was wrong. The house, his family's fortress, was supposed to be impenetrable. He slid out of bed. His feet were cold on the marble floor. He moved towards his door, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. He opened it a crack. The hallway was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight filtering through a large window at the far end. That's when the smell hit him. Coppery, metallic, thick in the air, the scent of blood. A whimper. It came from the direction of his parents' master suite. It was his sister's voice. Priya. He didn't call out. Instinct screamed at him to remain silent. He crept down the hallway, each step a universe of dread. The door to his parents' room was slightly ajar. A low, flickering light emanated from within, the light of a television left on. He pushed the door open. The sight would be seared into his memory for the rest of his life. His father, Bedi, lay on the floor beside the bed. His mother, Amarjit, was sprawled across it. The pristine white sheets were drenched in crimson. They were still. Utterly, unnaturally still. In the corner of the room, his sister Priya was huddled, her clothes torn, her arm bleeding. Her eyes were wide with a terror that seemed to have consumed her very soul. She was staring at him, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound emerged. A loving couple, slaughtered in their own home. A daughter, a traumatized witness. How could such a brutal act occur in this peaceful family? And who was responsible? Let's uncover the truth. To understand the depth of the tragedy, one must first understand the life the Bedis built. It was, by all accounts, a testament to success. The patriarch, 68-year-old Baldev Bedi, was a titan in Delhi's competitive textile industry. He was a self-made man who had, through decades of relentless work, built an empire from a single fabric stall. He was known in his circles as a shrewd, no-nonsense businessman. At home, however, he was a proud father and a devoted husband. His wife, Amarjit, 65, was his perfect complement. She was a woman of grace and quiet strength, the heart of the Bedi household. While Baldev built their fortune, Amarjit built their home, filling it with warmth and tradition. She was known for her piety and her unwavering support of her family. Their home in Vasant Vihar was more than just a house. It was a symbol of their journey, a lavish, multi-story structure that spoke of wealth, security, and permanence. They had 2 children. The eldest, Vikram, was 35. He was the heir apparent, groomed from a young age to inherit the family business. Vikram was his father's son, sharp, ambitious, and deeply respectful of the legacy he was set to inherit. He had recently returned from earning his MBA in the United States, ready to apply his modern knowledge to the traditional foundations of the Bedi enterprise. His younger sister, Priya, 29, was quieter. While Vikram was outgoing and confident, Priya was more reserved and artistic. She had studied design but had not pursued a career with the same vigor as her brother. She lived at home, managing aspects of the household alongside her mother. To the outside world, she was the dutiful, loving daughter. The Bedis presented a united, prosperous front. They were pillars of their community, their lives a carefully curated picture of domestic harmony and success. But beneath this placid surface lay a shadow, a piece of family lore that was spoken of only in whispers. It was what the elders called the Bedi curse. The story went that generations ago, an ancestor had wronged a business partner who in turn had cursed the family line to an eternity of misfortune, betrayal, and jealousy from outsiders. Baldev Bedi publicly dismissed it as nonsensical superstition. His success, he would often say, was proof that hard work, not fate, determined a man's destiny. Yet the story lingered, a ghost in the narrative of their otherwise perfect life. It was a story that, in the coming days, would be resurrected to explain the unexplainable horror that had just befallen them. The first call to the Delhi police control room was logged at 2:48 a.m. It was from a frantic Vikram Bedi. Within minutes, the serene, tree-lined street of the Bedi residence was flooded with the flashing red and blue lights of police vehicles. Inspector Arjun Singh, a veteran of the city's homicide division, was the lead investigator on the scene. The initial walkthrough was chillingly methodical. The forensic team, clad in white suits, began their painstaking work. They documented the blood spatter patterns, collected fibers, and dusted for fingerprints. The master bedroom was a scene of savage violence. The victims had sustained multiple, fatal stab wounds. The room had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, clothes strewn across the floor, a small safe in the walk-in closet forced open and emptied. It had all the hallmarks of a robbery homicide. Priya, having received first aid for a superficial cut on her forearm, was wrapped in a blanket, her body trembling. Vikram, though visibly in shock, maintained a stoic composure that impressed the officers. He was the anchor in the storm, the only one coherent enough to provide a preliminary statement. Inspector Singh sat with Vikram in the quiet formality of the family's living room, a space that only hours before had been a symbol of peace. "Mr. Bedi," Singh began gently, "I know this is incredibly difficult, but I need you to tell me everything you can think of. Did your father have any enemies? Anyone who would wish him harm?" Vikram's gaze was hard, his grief momentarily replaced by a cold fury. He looked directly at the inspector. "It wasn't just anyone," he said, his voice low and steady. "It was the Chaudharys." The name landed with significant weight. Even Inspector Singh knew of the Chaudharys. They were the Bedi's biggest rivals in the textile market. The two families had a long and bitter history. Vikram leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. "This rivalry goes back decades," he explained. "But it's gotten worse. My father, Baldev, was about to close a massive international deal, a deal the Chaudharys were desperate to get. Their patriarch, Harish Chaudhary, is a snake. He operates through threats and intimidation." He then connected this modern-day feud to the old family legend. "Inspector," Vikram said, his voice dropping, "my family has always been plagued by this curse. My grandmother used to say that our prosperity invites a unique kind of evil. People see what we have, and they want to destroy it. The Chaudharys are the embodiment of that curse. They have been trying to ruin us for years." He recounted specific incidents. A key supplier for the Bedis had mysteriously pulled out of a contract last year, only to sign with the Chaudharys a week later. There had been anonymous threats made to his father over the phone, which Baldev had dismissed as scare tactics. Vikram even described a heated public argument between his father and Harish Chaudhary's eldest son at a recent industry event. "Anup, my cousin, works for me. He told me he overheard one of the Chaudhary sons saying, 'Old man Bedi will get what's coming to him. Some families are just born unlucky.' They were talking about the curse, they were mocking it, and they were using it as a threat." Vikram's testimony was compelling. It was delivered with the conviction of a grieving son who believed every word he said. He was painting a clear picture for the police. A brutal business rivalry that had escalated to murder, carried out by ruthless competitors who cloaked their greed in the language of an old family curse. The ransacked room, the stolen valuables, it all fit the narrative of a message being sent. A hit, disguised as a robbery. The police had their first and most promising lead. The investigation immediately pivoted to focus on the Chaudhary family. Inspector Singh dispatched a team to track down Harish Chaudhary and his sons for questioning. The curse had provided a powerful motive, and Vikram Bedi had given them a name. The audience, like the police, was now looking squarely at the Chaudharys, convinced that the key to this horrific crime lay within the bitter world of business and a rivalry that had finally, and tragically, drawn blood. For the next 48 hours, the investigation centered entirely on the Chaudhary family. Detectives brought in Harish Chaudhary's two sons for questioning. They were arrogant and dismissive, but their stories were consistent. More importantly, Their alibis were solid. On the night of the murders, they had been hosting a large public dinner for a visiting trade delegation. Dozens of credible witnesses could place them at a five-star hotel across the city until at least 3 a.m. Their father, Harish, was not even in the country. Flight records confirmed he was in Dubai and had been for a week. The primary theory, the one so convincingly presented by Vikram, was beginning to fall apart. Inspector Singh was a man who trusted facts over narratives. While his team was chasing the Chaudhary lead, he was focused on the inconsistencies emerging from the forensic reports and the crime scene itself. The first major crack appeared in the theory of a forced entry. The Bedi residence was equipped with a state-of-the-art security system. Every door and window was wired. The forensic team, in their final report, stated unequivocally, there were no signs of forced entry on any of the primary or secondary access points. The main door was locked from the inside when police arrived. The locking mechanism had not been tampered with. How did multiple violent assailants get into a secure house without breaking in? The second inconsistency was the nature of the robbery. The intruders had forced open a safe containing cash and some bonds, but they had completely ignored a diamond necklace and heavy gold bangles that Amarjeet Bedi was wearing. They had also overlooked a collection of expensive watches sitting in plain sight on Baldev's dresser. Experienced robbers, especially those hired for a hit, would have been more thorough. The scene felt staged, an amateur's idea of what a robbery should look like. But the most significant crack came from the medical examiner's report on Priya Bedi. Inspector Singh read the lines over and over. The lacerations on the subject's left forearm are superficial. They are uniform in depth and parallel in arrangement. The location is easily accessible to the subject's right hand. These characteristics are highly consistent with self-inflicted injuries. Priya had claimed that one of the intruders had held her down and sliced her arm with a knife, but the evidence suggested she had cut herself. This damning medical finding forced investigators to re-examine Priya's initial statement with a new critical lens. She had claimed that 3 large men in masks had burst into her parents' room. She said they had killed her parents first, then injured her before she fainted from fear. This was when investigators sought out all available CCTV footage from the neighborhood. A camera on a neighboring property, though grainy, provided the next crucial piece of the puzzle. It captured a lone figure, slim and agile, scaling a low section of the Bedi's rear perimeter wall at approximately 1:15 a.m. The figure disappeared into the garden. At 2:05 a.m., the same single figure was seen leaving the same way. The camera never captured a group of 3 men. It captured one person. And according to the timeline, this person entered and exited the property long before Priya's scream supposedly woke her brother, Vikram. The final piece that shattered the initial narrative came from the digital forensics unit. They had begun a background check on the entire family, a standard procedure. This included an analysis of their phone records. While Vikram's and his parents' records showed nothing unusual, Priya's told a different story. For the past 6 months, she had been in near constant contact with a single number. Hundreds of calls, often late at night. Thousands of text messages. The number belonged to a man named Samir Sharma. A quick check revealed that Samir, 28, was a former employee at a Bedi textile factory. He had been fired 6 months prior. The reason for termination, according to company records, insubordination and suspected theft. The man who had fired him was Baldev Bedi himself. Suddenly, all the disparate facts began to coalesce into a new, terrifying picture. No forced entry, a staged robbery, self-inflicted wounds, a single intruder on camera, and a secret, intense relationship with a disgruntled ex-employee. The focus of the investigation shifted dramatically. The red herring of the Chaudhary family and the mystical curse evaporated under the harsh light of evidence. The suspicion was now turning inwards, towards the surviving daughter, the quiet and unassuming Priya Bedi. Inspector Singh now had a case built on evidence, not just testimony. He requested Priya Bedi to come to the station for a follow-up interview. She arrived with Vikram, who still believed his sister was a traumatized victim, and he was there purely for her support. Priya was taken into an interrogation room alone. The tone was different this time. There was no gentle sympathy. Inspector Singh and a female constable sat opposite her. He began calmly, laying out photographs on the metal table between them. "Priya, we need to go over your statement one more time," he began. "You said there were 3 men." He slid a still from the CCTV footage across the table. "Our evidence shows only one person entered your property that night." Priya stared at the grainy image. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but she quickly masked it. "It was dark. I was terrified. Maybe I was wrong about the number." Singh didn't acknowledge her answer. He slid the next document over, the forensic report on the locks. "Our teams found no sign of a break-in. The house was sealed. Can you explain how these men got inside?" I don't know," she stammered. "The door, maybe a servant left it unlocked." "We've confirmed all staff left by 9 p.m., and the system was armed by your father at 11, Singh countered, his voice remaining level. He then pushed the medical examiner's report in front of her, with the section on her injuries highlighted. "And then there's this, Priya. The doctor who examined you concluded that your wounds were self-inflicted." Her composure began to crack. "That's not true. He's lying. One of them cut me." "Who cut you, Priya?" Singh pressed, his voice hardening for the first time. "The man on the CCTV? The one you led into the house?" He saved the most damning evidence for last. He placed a printout of her phone records on the table. "Samir Sharma. You called him 8 times the day your parents were murdered. You exchanged 52 text messages. The last call was at 12:45 a.m., just 30 minutes before our cameras show an intruder entering your home. Samir Sharma was fired by your father. Tell me about him." At the mention of Samir's name, Priya Bedi broke. The carefully constructed facade of the grieving daughter disintegrated. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, guttural sound of defeat. The dam of lies had burst. For several minutes, she wept uncontrollably. The officers waited in silence. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled not with grief, but with years of cold, simmering rage. The truth, when it came, was more twisted than the curse could ever be. If you've reached this part of the video, please don't forget to give it a like. Thank you. Under intense questioning, Priya's confession tumbled out, a story of deep-seated resentment, forbidden love, and horrifying greed that stunned every officer in the room. She was not the quiet, content daughter. She was a woman who felt like a ghost in her own family. "It was always about Vikram," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "Vikram the heir, Vikram the future. I was just the daughter, the one to be married off. My degree, my ambitions, they were hobbies to my parents. Vikram's were destiny." This resentment found a focal point in her relationship with Samir Sharma. They had met when he worked at the factory and had fallen deeply in love. But Samir was from a middle-class family, deemed entirely unsuitable for a Bedi daughter. When her father, Baldev, found out about their secret relationship, he was furious. He not only forbade Priya from seeing Samir, but fired him under a false pretext of theft to ensure he was removed from their lives completely. This act was the final betrayal. In Priya's mind, her parents had not just rejected her choice of partner, they had rejected her. They had chosen the family's reputation and their son's future over her happiness. It was then that she and Samir began to plot. The plan was born of rage and greed. They would not just run away, they would take what Priya felt she was owed, her share of the family fortune. And the only way to get it was to remove the obstacles, her parents. The curse was a convenient narrative. She knew her brother Vikram believed in the old stories. She knew he would immediately look for an external enemy. By feeding him the story of a robbery gone wrong, she could direct all suspicion to the Chaudharies, playing on a decades-old feud to cover the ultimate insider crime. The entire plan was a monstrous act of manipulation. With her brother as the primary pawn, the arrest warrant for Samir Sharma was issued immediately. Priya Bedi, the surviving daughter and star witness, was arrested for the conspiracy and murder of her own parents. Priya's confession, later corroborated by Samir after his arrest, laid bare the clinical and callous anatomy of the crime. This was not a spontaneous act of passion. It was a meticulously planned execution. The planning began the day Samir was fired. Over the next 6 months, their anger festered, and their plot took shape through hundreds of secret calls and messages. Priya was the inside woman. She knew the layout of the house, the security protocols, and her parents' routines. First, she identified a weakness in the security system. A single motion sensor in the rear garden had a known blind spot, a small section of the wall that was obscured by a large banyan tree. This would be Sameer's entry point. Second, she needed to ensure her brother Vikram would not wake up during the crime. The night of the murders, she prepared a late-night glass of warm milk for him, a common habit in the household. This time, however, she laced it with a strong, crushed-up sleeping pill. He drank it without suspicion and fell into a deep sleep. Third was access. At 1:15 a.m., after confirming Sameer was in position via text, Priya went downstairs. She manually disarmed the single zone covering the back patio door, a function she had access to from the main keypad. She unlocked the door and let Sameer inside. He was dressed in black, his face covered, and he carried a bag containing a pair of sharp knives and gloves. They moved in complete silence upstairs to the master bedroom. According to Sameer's confession, Priya stood guard at the door while he entered the room. Her parents were asleep. He went to Baldev's side of the bed first, attacking him swiftly. Amarjeet woke at the sound and started to scream, but Sameer moved to smother her before she could make more than a muffled cry, killing her next. Once the deed was done, the staging began. As per their plan, Sameer ransacked the room, pulling open drawers and forcing the small safe to create the illusion of a robbery. Priya directed him, telling him which items to take and which to leave to make the story plausible. Then came the most chilling part of the plan, creating the witness. Priya took one of the smaller knives from Sameer's bag. With cold precision, she drew the blade across her own forearm, creating the wounds that would make her a victim. At 2:05 a.m., Sameer slipped out the way he came, disappearing into the Delhi night. Priya waited. She told police she waited a full 10 minutes, a calculated delay to allow Sameer to get away. She then began to whimper and cry, eventually making her way to the hallway to scream, a performance designed to wake her heavily sedated brother and set the entire tragic misdirection in motion. The curse was not an external force. It was a poison that had been cultivated within the family's own walls. Based on Priya's detailed confession, a police team located and arrested Sameer Sharma at his small apartment in East Delhi. He confessed almost immediately, his version of events matching Priya's in every horrific detail. The knives used in the murders were recovered from a storm drain where he had disposed of them. The conspiracy was sealed. For Vikram Bedi, the revelation was a blow from which he would likely never recover. He had lost his parents to a brutal act of violence. Then, in a second, more profound wave of devastation, he lost his sister. He was forced to confront the fact that the person he was trying to protect was, in fact, the architect of his entire world's destruction. The family curse he had so readily blamed was a lie, a manipulative tool used by his own sister to orchestrate the slaughter of their parents and mislead him completely. He was left alone to manage a shattered business empire and the ruins of a family built on a foundation of secrets and resentment. The subsequent trial was a media sensation in Delhi. Priya Bedi and Sameer Sharma were tried together. The prosecution laid out the overwhelming evidence: the phone records, the CCTV footage, the medical reports, and their own detailed confessions. There was little defense they could offer. Both were found guilty of multiple counts of murder and criminal conspiracy. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, condemned to spend the rest of their days behind bars, paying for a crime born of greed and a profound failure of love. The Bedi textile empire, once a symbol of success, became a monument to a tragedy that defied all superstition, proving that the most terrifying demons are often not the ones from old stories, but the ones that live inside the human heart. So, this was today's case. What do you think about it? Please share your thoughts and leave a heart in the comments. Thank you.